everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Criminally Human. I am your host, and happy Sunday. I hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe. Please excuse my voice. I'm feeling much better, but not 100% back to myself. So, they have now released the picture of this knife sheath, and all it did was show me why I questioned this entire story from the beginning. Moscow PD, you have some serious explaining to do. So, you want me to believe that a man stormed into a home, killed four people, and left behind just one clue, a knife sheath, one piece of leather, one snap of DNA, enough to change Brian's life forever? But what if the sheath wasn't evidence? What if the sheath was bait? Because everything about the crime scene is wrong. And if I'm being honest, the house was not covered in enough blood for me. The weapon we were told caused all of this was never found. And the only thing that they did was show us that it looks too clean and too convenient. They said that Bryan Kohberger was reckless, but what if the real recklessness wasn't him? What if the scene was crafted not to tell the truth, but to sell us a story? So, yeah, I'm going to have to go ahead and call bullshit on what they want us to believe. They want us to believe that this was found next to a victim. But how isn't the whole thing covered in blood? And how could he remove the knife only by touching the button on the sheath? After all, weren't they the ones that said that that's where the DNA was found? If this was truly a quadruple murder stabbing with multiple victims on different floors, then why does the most important piece of evidence look like it just came out of a display case at a military surplus store? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call a distraction. If they show you a sheath, you'll stop asking for the knife. If they say DNA was found, you stop talking about the chain of custody. So, if we believe the story that they've told us, in the weeks after these murders, reports made one thing clear: the scene was horrific. There were multiple stab wounds per victim. There were wounds that were described as overkill. There were defensive wounds suggesting that some of the victims fought back, and blood was reportedly seeping outside of the foundation of the home. So naturally, the one assumption was this house must have been covered in blood. But when the images finally surfaced, what we saw did not match what they told us. Some rooms looked too clean, even with clean walls and no blood spray. I expected to see blood spray from arteries, the kind that you'd expect from a violent stabbing, the way that they described it. There were no swipe patterns or bloody footprints dragging across the house. And most shockingly, the sheath has not one visible drop of blood on it. How does that make sense? So, I guess what I'm saying is this: if the sheath was found next to a victim's body in a room where a brutal stabbing supposedly took place, how is there no visible blood? And what is even more confusing is that the blood reportedly dripped down the outside of the house on the wall. But when you look inside of that same room, it's nearly pristine. So, no, something does not sound right. Then, if we look at the surviving roommate's testimony, which she shall remain nameless because I can't stand her lying ass. She said she heard a firecracker. So one of the surviving roommates claimed that she heard what sounded like a firecracker. And here is why that matters. A firecracker sounds more like a gunshot rather than a stabbing. I don't know where everybody else is from, but some people will understand. If you know, you know. The firecracker is the distraction. If you know, you know. People who are stabbed, especially ones fighting back like they told us, they scream, they thrash, they knock things over. The lack of noise from multiple attacks raises questions about what really happened. So the real question becomes, were they all stabbed or were they silenced by another means first? And why hasn't that line of questioning been taken seriously? So, when we start looking at things in an intelligent way, and the majority of my viewers and subscribers, about 90% of y'all, are actually smart. When we start looking at what they've given us, we've never seen the murder weapon. Now we've only seen the sheath. If the sheath was left, why not the knife? If the killer was actually careful enough to take the weapon, why would he or she be dumb enough to leave behind the sheath and only that? How did they find DNA only on the snap but not on the rest of it? And like I said earlier, the DNA is on the snap of the sheath. So when the person removed the knife out of that, you didn't touch anything else but the button. That feels more like a planted breadcrumb. And the timing was perfect. It was found not during the first walkthrough, but it was found during the second walkthrough of the scene after officers had already combed through the area. And let's not act like police officers are not known for planning evidence, especially in high pressure and high profile cases. They've been doing it forever. So, how convenient that the one item linking Bryan to the scene is also the cleanest piece of evidence. Somebody please make that make sense. Then we also have the pattern of selective evidence. No photos publicly released showing the blood stain around the sheath. You show us this bullshit piece of leather and say he did it, he's guilty. This ties Mr. Bryan Kohberger to this fatal murder stabbing of these four people. Look at the sheath, he did it. Where is the blood? Where is the pictures around this sheath that show visible blood? And also, I find it really funny how there are no detailed public autopsy reports. They just feed us summarized statements. Do you know why? Because they are controlling what we see and, more importantly, what we don't see. There is no transparency at all. It's just a narrative. And even if they're lying by omission, they're still lying. So let me go back to this firecracker statement that one of the roommates made. She did not report hearing screams. She never mentioned gasps for help, never heard collapsing furniture or the chaos that you would expect when four people are being murdered. She said she heard something that sounded like a firecracker, not a cry. I can't imagine there not being like screams, literally bloody murder. Oh God, someone's in the house. I'm being stabbed, or they're trying to warn other people. So if we go by the narrative that they gave us, let me go ahead and pick their shit apart real quick. So picking it apart, we have not a cry. We have not a fight. We have just a single sharp pop. A pop. That's not a stabbing. That is something else. That is something faster. That is something that does not give a victim a chance to scream. If it was truly a knife attack, how does no one hear all of these people being attacked and a violent stabbing? No thuds, no breaking glass, no cries echoing throughout the house, just a pop. Then Homegirl said she opened her door, saw a figure in black with a mask, and she froze. They walked right past her. So I just massacred all these people in the house. You open the door. I see you, see me. Peekaboo. You see me. I see you. We see each other. She froze. They walked right past her. No chase. They were never a threat to her. She was never a threat to them. Because it's as if she wasn't the target. Like she was never part of the actual plan to begin with. Whoever is the higher ups, whoever is their PR people, it really wasn't smart releasing the images of the sheath. They want us chasing these breadcrumbs, the sheath, the car, the DNA. But what they don't want us looking at, now that they've released this, it makes me question even more the missing surveillance footage from the neighbors' homes and the campus buildings. Why don't they have that? The 911 call that no one can get a full unredacted copy of. Everything has been redacted. Why? The demolition of the house before a single trial witness ever took the stand. Why? The university's contracts and behind the scenes involvement with the cleanup. The real estate shell companies who have flipped properties connected to law enforcement, the court, and the campuses. The LLCs that were formed years before the murders tied to that address and then quietly dissolved days after the demolition. The glaring lack of EMS body cam footage or forensic photos released to the public. The vague statements from police, which are always carefully worded and never fully committing to what happened that night. They were never investigating a crime, they were setting up a story. This case has more smoke and mirrors than it does clarity. And if you're only looking at where they point, you'll never see what they're hiding. The prosecutor said, "We got it. We have damning evidence. He did it. We're going to prove this. We're taking him to trial. Bryan Kohberger, he did it. He's guilty." They say the truth is in the detail. But in this case, the truth feels scrubbed clean. The sheath and the crime scene are too quiet. The story is too neat. This story is almost rehearsed. We all watched the body cam footage, and you can't tell me that anybody with a piece of a brain watched it and said, "Oh my goodness, they're really traumatized. This is really what happened." It's been lies from the very beginning. And the moment you start pulling at those loose threads, the whole thing begins to unravel. Because what kind of massacre leaves behind a souvenir that looks untouched? There are no blood trails where there should have been complete chaos. No firecracker debris. And one of the victims said she heard what she thought was a firecracker. And now the house is completely demolished under healing for the community. It's not healing at all. It was about hiding and erasing and rewriting the ending before the real story could be told, before any of us could see what really happened inside of 1122 King Road. Think about this. If the most damning piece of evidence, this sheath, is clean, it's this convenient and this heavily emphasized, what else was too clean? What else was planted? What else was removed before anyone could ask the right questions? They did not just destroy a crime scene, they quieted the crime scene. And every day that passes without answers, the silence gets louder. What happens when the evidence does not match the story? When the blood isn't where it should be? When the timeline is too quiet? Maybe it was not this messy crime. Maybe it was something colder, cleaner, and more calculated. And maybe we were never meant to find out the truth. So at this point, when do we stop tiptoeing around the survivors and actually start asking real hard questions? When do we say that the spirits of the actual victims in this case deserve the truth? Because if we're being honest, what exactly did they survive? A night of silence while their friends were being slaughtered in the same house? Not a single call to 911 after seeing a masked man walk through your home? I don't know how people do it in Idaho, but where I'm at, if a masked man is in my house, you take care of that yourself or you call the police immediately. You don't call your roommate. You don't spoon with your roommate throughout the night and then craft up a story. You don't hide behind innocence when you're old enough to party, drink, and move like an adult. So miss me with the bullshit and those excuses. At some point, y'all have to actually use your brains. The public has poured endless sympathy into these survivors. But what about the four who never made it out? the ones who had no voice, no say, and no true justice. While everyone is protecting the feelings of those trashy people, the dead have been erased again. And if energy lingers and the truth has been buried, then maybe the darkest point of this case is not the evidence. Maybe it's the silence. Those victims were not just murdered, they were written out of their own story, silenced twice, one in blood and once in the cover up that followed. Do you ever think that maybe the reason the story feels off is because the dead are the only ones who haven't been heard? The so called survivors are getting sympathy, protection, and silence. But what about the ones who lost everything? The ones who couldn't correct the lies, who speak from the spirits trapped still within that house. The survivors claim that they slept through it all, but they knew how to party. I cannot get over this masked man being in your home and your first instinct was not to call 911. That to me says more than anything. Meanwhile, four souls are gone, not honored, just gone. And maybe the blood is not the only thing that was scrubbed clean. Meanwhile, the timeline, the evidence, and the witness accounts were cleansed too. It was sanitized and it was staged. Because when the living are protected, the dead are forgotten. So, what are we left with? A murder case, and it's haunting. And if you still think that Bryan Kohberger did this without questioning a single hole in their story, you are exactly what is wrong with this world. Blind belief in a narrative full of contradictions is not justice, it's obedience. And if something this horrific ever touched your world, I truly do pray that your loved ones have more of a spine and more of a brain than you do, because the truth deserves way more than just your laziness. And this has been another episode of Criminally Human, where we don't just tell stories, we honor them. Over here, we don't chase clicks, we chase clarity. And when the system buries the truth, over here, we start digging. Stay tuned for part 2 of The Sixth Roommate. And let me make something clear before I go. If the way that I present this case does not align with your expectations, that is fine. I understand that I am not everyone's cup of tea. I'm a big girl. I can take that. But this channel, it's mine. This channel is built on integrity. This channel is built on research. This channel is driven by evidence and also fueled by the belief that the dead and the living also deserve answers and that the truth deserves a voice, even if the shit I talk about shakes a room. So if you're here for just a little bit of gossip or just a little bit of tea, maybe you're in the wrong place. I will never air a story if I cannot back up what I'm saying. I will not put labels on people's names just to make other people feel happy. I have been presented with information and chose not to air it because after I did my due diligence, I figured out that that's not even what was really happening. This is not the type of channel where we'll just go and label people because viewers want them labeled a certain way, or we'll just air a video on other people's time when they feel like we should have just dropped it. So if you're here for justice, some courage, and uncomfortable questions, then welcome home. I'll see you on the next video, and your girl is out.